People will scramble to justify themselves, and most of the time, it's not a sign of strength, but of weakness. The power of silence and reflection is much more powerful. You see, reactions would undermine credibility, and it would reveal one's weakness in a quiet manner. Bear with me, as what happened next will shock you to your core. My brothers and sisters, listen carefully to what I am saying. It was a Sunday morning, as the sun rose over the Brooklyn Bridge. Happenings thousands of miles away, on the other side of the Atlantic, were peaceful and quiet. Then the calm was shattered. Phones buzzed at the same time. Alerts came through. YouTube channels went live at the same time. Social media feeds burst into action. Something was afoot. That was a message that was going out, not from Washington, nor from Paris, but from Agadez, from the very center of my own land, from Burkina Faso, the land of erect and proud men and women. This was no politician reading from a prepared script. This was personal. This was direct. This was honest. This was me, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, speaking directly to you. They call me young. They caused brother to turn against brother. And in the West, they took your names. They took your identity. I said they beat your languages into you, made it illegal to speak the way of your ancestors. But even after all of that, something remained. The beat of your walk, the rhythm of your talk, the pulse in your breast, the drums in your soul. That is Africa, and Africa remains in you. Those words crossing an ocean stirred a reaction in those distant homes and communities. People sensed it. There were tears. The barbershops in Chicago dimmed as the volume of the music was lowered. The men listened. The seniors in Atlanta settled in prayer, the rosary in their hands. The activists in Harlem, a community founded on the idea of resistance, suspended their activity. It was as if a distant voice was heard after a while. But then my tone shifted, because it had to. This was not going to be another history lesson. I did not personally come here merely to remind you of the chains. You already know the chains. You have borne them for so many years. This is something different. The chains are breaking. I gave this effort a title, Operation Sanka. It comes from our ancestors in the Akan culture, and it means this: to go back and take back what was taken from them. Your history, your culture, your home. Within this vision, I said, African countries, finally, free from the grip of the West, will not have to stand alone anymore. Together, we will construct a development corridor for our brothers and sisters who have been living in the diaspora. We need you. We need doctors and nurses, farmers and engineers, teachers, artists, and builders of every sort. However, one thing was certain. This was not charity. This was not a rescue mission. We did not need saviors. We require builders. You do not come here as strangers. You come here as parts of a strong mosaic that was broken apart in a violent way. You return to repair it. I spoke the truth. Africa is no fantasy land. We know poverty, corruption, the scars of history run deep. But with you, with us, anything is possible. As the message concluded, silence fell. Not emptiness, but the sacred. A 26-year-old teacher named Malik sat motionless in his small apartment on Thifro Caribbeans. African Americans, Brazilians, Haitians, Black Europeans, they all came from somewhere. Some of them wore dashikis and traditional clothing. Others wore jeans, hoodies, or suits. But they all brought with them something much heavier than baggage: purpose, curiosity, and an acute desire to belong, a yearning for home. The Diaspora Congress began modestly, without fireworks, without celebrities, without spectacle. Leaders poured libations on the land, nourishing the soil, speaking to ancestors in the languages of their homelands: Bambara, Wolof, Yoruba, Haitian Creole. This is what it is to be alive, to touch the dirt. I entered the arena without bodyguards. I did not need them. The crowd was my safeguard. The crowd rose, no applause, no cheering, just complete and utter silence. Then a voice started singing. Another voice was added, and then another, and soon 1,000 voices blended together as one redemption song. And when the last note ended, I stepped out. This is not a political rally, I declared. This is a healing ceremony disguised as a summit. I held a document, the Sanka Pact, drafted in various languages. The pact defined the rights and duties of the returnees. The land would be leased, not sold. The enterprises, I said, we're building this. This is not a cult, this is culture. Quietly, and with circumspection, I sanctioned the formation of a new protective intelligence unit. It was Pan-African volunteerism of the diaspora, young black men and women with military training from the United States, Jamaica, Ghana, and Nigeria. They chose a name that carried weight and memory, Sankara Guard. Back in a rural village near Go, 82-year-old Mama Ruth from Detroit knelt beside local women in the soil, planting her very first cassava crop. She did not want to be left out. She dove headfirst into the agricultural initiative. "I spent my whole life feeding people with food stamps," she softly said. "Before I die, I want to feed someone with my own hands." The village women gave her a new name, Ma Courage, Mother Courage. She became a living, breathing witness that this return was not symbolic, it was real. The others followed. An aging jazz musician from New Orleans founded a community music school. A former Black Panther from Oakland trained local security forces, not just in self-defense, but in our classrooms, children learned about Marcus Garvey and Queen Nzinga alongside local history. In the same, they were able to sense the unusual movements in the troops early, and they did not hesitate. When the coup plotters arrived at the gates of the presidential compound, 60 soldiers of the Sankara Guard were already there. Some were Burkinabes, but there were African-American, Afro-Brazilian, even Tahitians who had fought in the streets of Port-au-Prince. They wore no uniforms, just armbands with red, black, and green stripes, symbolizing the colors of the new Africa. Captain Edemarco raised his fist. "No one enters," he shouted. "This gate is protected by our ancestors." Gunfire was brief but fierce. 2 members of the Sankara Guard were killed. 4 rebel soldiers were taken alive. The rest dispersed into the darkness. I never left the compound, but instead, I broadcast from a secret backup transmitter hidden under a former French military base. "They sought to pry this moment from us," I announced, my voice ringing out through the night air. "They sought to turn back the clock, but this is not Africa as it was in the days of 1966 or 1983. We shall not be overridden. We shall rise on top." The thwarted coup caused waves of shock to spread throughout. The African Union kept mum about it. Black TikTok was on fire. A teenage hacker in Nigeria created an app for storing my speeches in various languages. A spoken word poet in Atlanta created a poem gone viral, "Dear Africa, I Heard You Calling." A collaboration of Afrobeats artists in Lagos, Accra, and Johannesburg produced an anthem with a single phrase, "We're coming home," in the Bronx, Chicago, and Compton. Young black artists started to paint murals with my face beside Malcolm X and Garvey, history speaking to the present. One morning, a village boy, barefoot, handed me a letter. It was from Mama Ruth. "My son," she wrote, "they may fear you, but I believe in you. I have never seen a man fight with so much tenderness, and yet still have his voice heard across the oceans. I am old, but I will live just long enough to see the seed take root. When I am gone, bury me in the soil. Let my body nourish the next generation. Tell the children that it was my decision to come to Africa, with all of my love from Detroit to Ku." Then they started to arrive, not soldiers, missionaries, or one day. A storm erupted. Mainstream media from the West reproduced explosive news that I had channeled millions of gold reserves into secret offshore bank accounts, while photographs showed me posing with men identified as Russian weapons traffickers. There was also a voice message thought to be from me, which said, "Let the West burn if Africa must survive." The internet went crazy. The African Union called for an investigation. Even the politicians who had secretly admired me started criticizing my moves. Fear spread in Sankara Hills. Families wondered if they should question my moves. Some diaspora leaders wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. Not all people were deceived, however, but a Haitian journalist, now based in Bobo-Dioulasso, a young woman named Solange Moreau, decided to dig deeper. She analyzed the data in the pictures and found that the photographs were fabricated using AI, the voice in the recording, a deepfake. She published her findings with the headline, "You can't kill the truth with a keyboard." The article went viral in a short while. Black media networks on the continent replicated her report, exposing the scandal for what it was: a lie, a trick. But the damage had already, however. Survival was never the issue. The question at hand was this: will you finally recognize that you are free? Will you ever stop waiting for others to save you? Because if I were to come back, it wouldn't be to lead, but to watch you all become exactly what our ancestors had always dreamed of. The crowd erupted. Men openly wept. Women lifted their fists in the air. Children scaled the roofs, shouting, "Try our lives." In that instance, the revolution was not a theory. It had turned real. The next morning, hundreds of thousands marched through the streets of Ouagadougou. Black banners highlighted with the face of Sankara unwavered under the bright sun. Drums thumped. Elderly men,